Tonight, we slip quietly into a childhood that looks like a fairy tale from the outside and feels, from the inside, like a gilded cage with excellent lighting. Forget everything you think you know about growing up a princess in Tudor England, the soft lullabies, the doting parents, the happily ever after. The truth is you were born a political instrument with a heartbeat, wrapped in the finest linen the realm could buy, and watched, quite literally, by dozens of eyes from the moment you drew your first breath.
The king is
So
dead.
before we begin, if you'd like to drift off gently tonight, go ahead and hit subscribe. And if audio is more your pace, we're also on Spotify. The link waits for you below. For those who want the whole night covered without a single ad breaking the spell, there's a membership offering hours of uninterrupted ad-free calm, also linked below. Whenever you're ready, dim the lights, let a fan hum somewhere in the background, and let's begin. A few questions before you drift away. Did a Tudor princess ever choose the man she married, or even see his face before the wedding day? Was her radiant white complexion a beauty secret, or a slow poison she applied with her own hands? Could a single rumor, true or not, undo years of careful reputation building in an afternoon? Was a princess ever truly alone, even while asleep? And could the same father who gave her a title take it away again with a single legal document? Congratulations. You have just opened your eyes in the year 1533. You are a princess of England. You own nothing. You control less. And somewhere across the sea, a foreign court is already discussing what you might be worth in a marriage treaty. Sleep well. Let's begin, as these things always do, with your birth, an event that thrilled almost no one. As a Tudor princess, your very first accomplishment in life was disappointing everyone in the room. The kingdom had spent 9 months praying for a prince, a future soldier, a future king, an heir who could inherit the throne without anyone blinking. Instead, they got you. The midwife delivers the news in the careful, deflated tone usually kept for announcing a failed harvest. Your father forces a smile that never quite reaches his eyes. Somewhere down the corridor, a trumpeter who had been standing by for triumphant fanfare is quietly told to stand down. This is nothing personal, you understand. Which is precisely what makes it sting. A king does not strictly need a daughter. A daughter cannot easily inherit a throne without controversy. She cannot lead an army. She cannot on her own secure the family name for another generation. What the crown wants, what it has been counting on, is a son, and ideally more than one, since child mortality in this era makes backup heirs a grim necessity rather than a luxury. You are, unfortunately, the wrong shape for that particular job. In the cold mathematics of dynasty, you are a placeholder, or worse, a bargaining chip to be spent later on some foreign alliance. There are naturally still celebrations. Bells ring. Announcements go out. A royal birth is a royal birth, and ceremony is not optional regardless of gender. But the enthusiasm is noticeably dialed down, the kind of applause reserved for a consolation prize rather than the grand jackpot everyone was hopping for. It is the difference between winning a modest raffle and winning the whole lottery. Both get you a nice envelope. Only one changes the mood of the entire household for a year. Your mother, meanwhile, carries a weight you cannot yet imagine. Her worth in this marriage is tied heavily to her ability to deliver sons, and she has just, through absolutely no fault of her own, delivered you instead. If this becomes a habit, if a prince simply refuses to arrive, her position at court begins to wobble. History remembers what happens to queens who cannot produce a male heir. So even as she loves you, and many mothers in her position did, fiercely, she also understands, somewhere in the back of her mind, that you represent unfinished business. No pressure, just the entire stability of the succession quietly resting on her next pregnancy. Word travels fast beyond the palace walls. Foreign ambassadors write home describing the birth with all the passion of a man filing a weather report. Rival courts note the news, file it away, and begin recalculating what alliances and marriages might now be possible. People you will never meet are already speculating about your future worth, which is a strange thing to be doing about someone who currently cannot lift her own head. And here is the peculiarly Tudor twist to it all. Your ranking in the family is never fixed. If a brother is born after you, you slide quietly down the ladder of importance. outranked by an infant who did nothing more remarkable than being born male. If no brother ever comes, you might suddenly become the most important person in the kingdom, the last hope of an entire dynasty that spent your childhood mildly unimpressed by you. Your value rises and falls based entirely on your parents' reproductive luck, a matter over which you have, and will always have, zero control. So welcome to the world, little princess. You've arrived to polite applause, an anxious mother, and a father already glancing toward the door, waiting for the real heir to walk through it. You are minutes old, and already the court has opened a running negotiation over exactly how much you're worth. It is a rough beginning to a story that is about to get significantly more crowded, because the moment you're born and quietly forgiven for existing, they hand you off to an entire staff of strangers. You might picture yourself nestled against your mother's chest for the first months of life. Charming thought. In reality, a royal infant is passed almost immediately into the hands of people who are not your parents at all. There is a wet nurse to feed you, a rocker to soothe your cradle through the night in careful shifts, and a governess to oversee the whole operation like a small, specialized government. Your mother, the queen, has more urgent business, namely, recovering from childbirth and beginning the process of trying again for a son. You will be raised in a household of your own, sometimes housed in an entirely different building, tended by staff who could be dismissed at a moment's notice through no decision of yours. The wet nurse deserves special mention, because she is both essential and strange. She is hired specifically to breastfeed you, since it is considered improper for a queen to nurse her own children, and conveniently, this also allows your mother to become fertile again sooner. This woman's temperament, diet, and moral character are all inspected closely, based on the belief that such qualities pass into you through her milk. A small but telling window into just how much medical understanding of the era got backwards. She may end up being one of the steadiest presences of your infancy, a paid stranger you must nonetheless learn to treat with warmth and deference. Your nursery is not a quiet corner tucked beside your parents' rooms. It is its own establishment, staffed, managed, and structured very much like a miniature royal court, because functionally, that is exactly what it is. Officials run it. Servants clean it. A governess presides over your daily existence with real authority. This entire operation may sit miles from your parents' residence, chosen specifically for its clean air and its distance from the crowded, disease-ridden atmosphere of the main court. You are being kept safe, which, in practice, mostly means being kept elsewhere. None of this comes from cruelty, or at least not intentionally. Infant mortality in this century is brutally high, and a royal child is treated as an extraordinarily precious and fragile investment. Isolating you in a controlled environment away from plague and filth genuinely does improve your odds of reaching adulthood. It is sensible. It is protective. It also means that your actual parents may visit only occasionally, arriving almost like formal guests come to inspect the progress of a valuable asset. So your first attachments are not to your mother and father, but to nurses, rockers, and a governess. The hands that feed you, the voices you learn to recognize. And even these bonds are unstable, because staff can be reassigned or dismissed for reasons that have nothing to do with your feelings. The people you love most in your small world may simply disappear one day, replaced by administrative decision, leaving you to attach yourself all over again to whoever arrives next. It is love on a rotating schedule. Think about what this does to a child growing up this way. You are surrounded by people whose primary relationship to you is professional. They may be genuinely fond of you, many surely were, but they are also employees, and very early on you absorb the lesson that affection and duty are tangled together in ways that are hard to pull apart. Warmth arrives wrapped in obligation. It is an unusual foundation on which to build any understanding of who loves you and why. By the time you're old enough to grasp who your parents actually are, your relationship with them is already largely ceremonial. You honor them. You obey them. You are presented to them on formal occasions. But the ordinary daily closeness of childhood, the ordinary intimacy most people take for granted, belongs instead to a household of paid strangers. You are raised with enormous care and staggering expense by people whose job it is to raise you. And through all of it, you are almost never, technically, alone. Which brings us to your mornings, because even sleep offers you no true privacy at all. Let's talk about your mornings because they do not begin with peace, quiet, or a single stolen moment of solitude. You open your eyes in a grand bed inside a grand chamber, and the very first thing you see is people. Your ladies-in-waiting have already been awake for hours. Someone is coaxing the fire back to life. Someone is airing your linens by the window. Someone else is simply standing nearby, because standing near you is, quite literally, the entirety of her job. Privacy, that small modern luxury we all take for granted, does not exist for you. You did not sleep alone. You will not dress alone. You will not so much as clear your throat without at least one noblewoman quietly registering it. Start with sleep itself, which is far less private than you might assume. It was entirely ordinary for a woman of high rank to share her bedchamber, and sometimes even her actual bed, with an attendant. These women stayed close to serve you, to guard you, and let's be honest, to keep a watchful eye on you. So the very first sensation of your day is the awareness that other people are already awake around you, having quite possibly spent the night listening to you breathe. There is no groggy, private minute to simply collect yourself. You open your eyes, and the working day of your entire household has already begun without waiting for you. The room itself is busy from the earliest hours of dawn. Fires are lit before you even stir, because a princess should never wake to a cold room, and tending that fire is someone's specific, assigned responsibility. Fresh linens, warmed water, aired garments, all of it prepared by hands that are not your own, while you are expected to simply lie there and receive the service. It is a peculiar kind of luxury, being unable to do anything for yourself, because doing it yourself would be improper, and would also put someone quite specifically out of a job. Now consider the ladies themselves, the noblewomen tasked with attending you. These are not servants in the ordinary sense. Many come from prominent families, placed in your household as both an honor and a calculated opportunity. Their closeness to you is, in fact, the entire point of their being there at all. They dress you. They accompany you everywhere. They hand you objects you could easily reach yourself. Proximity to a princess is a mark of prestige, which means your bedchamber each morning is genuinely crowded with high-status women whose great privilege is watching you wake up. The complete absence of solitude is hard to overstate if you've never lived it. In the modern world, we assume the basic right to close a door and simply not be observed for a while. You have no such right. Your standing, your safety, and the smooth functioning of your entire household all depend on being constantly attended, which means constantly accompanied, which means, in every practical sense, constantly watched. Even on the rare occasion you might long to be alone, being alone would itself be remarkable enough to draw comment. A wandering, unattended princess is a minor scandal waiting to happen. There is also a quieter form of surveillance woven into all this attention. The people around you are not merely serving you, they are studying you. And much of what they notice eventually travels elsewhere. Your moods, your offhand remarks, your health, your small habits are all, in their way, valuable information, and information is currency at court. So your morning is observed not only for the practical task of getting you dressed, but for the political purpose of understanding you. You are, quite literally, the most closely monitored person in the room, and this is all before breakfast has even been served. So you rise each day into a schedule that was arranged before you woke, tended by people whose entire job is proximity to you. There is no private, unguarded gesture, no clumsy moment that goes unseen, no time genuinely off stage. And now that you are thoroughly awake and thoroughly witnessed, the serious business of assembling your body into a princess can finally begin. Getting dressed. For a Tudor princess is not really a task so much as a construction project requiring a small crew of specialists. You cannot dress yourself not out of laziness, but because the outfit is, quite literally, impossible to assemble alone. First comes the smock, then a pair of stiffened bodies, an early ancestor of the corset, reinforced with wood or whalebone. then a farthingale to frame your skirts out into an imposing bell shape, then a kirtle, then the gown itself. Then sleeves, which are frequently separate pieces pinned on like detachable accessories. By the time the lacing is finished, you have been standing with your arms half raised for the better part of an hour, and bending at the waist is no longer really an option. Begin at the bottom, with the smock, the one genuinely comfortable garment in this entire architectural undertaking. It is a simple linen shift worn against bare skin, and it is the closest thing to comfort you will feel all day, because everything layered on top of it exists not for comfort, but to sculpt your body into the fashionable silhouette of the age. Rigid, geometric, and faintly upholstered. Next comes the pair of bodies, the early cousin of the corset, stiffened with strips of wood or whalebone to compress and smooth your torso into an unbroken cone shape. This is not a gentle suggestion of posture. It is enforcement. Once laced in, you sit upright because there is genuinely no other physical option available to you. Slouching has just been made structurally impossible by your own undergarments. Then the farthingale, a framework of hoops holding your skirts out wide from your hips, exactly as fashion demands. Picture wearing a small cage around your waist, over which fabric is then draped and arranged. Sitting becomes a small, calculated maneuver. Walking through doorways requires actual spatial awareness. Your physical footprint expands considerably, meaning you now occupy far more space than nature originally intended, and must navigate the world accordingly, like an extremely well-dressed piece of furniture that has decided to go for a walk. Over all of this go the kirtle and the gown, heavy layers of rich fabric adding weight, warmth, and grandeur in roughly equal measure. And then finally, the sleeves, frequently separate items, pinned or tied on rather than sewn into the gown itself. This means your arms are, in a sense, dressed almost independently from the rest of you, attached like accessories. If a sleeve works loose, you now have a small wardrobe emergency in the middle of an event. It is fashion assembled in modular pieces, held together by pins, patience, and the steady hands of your attendants. The entire process takes a genuinely long time and demands several sets of hands, because there is no way to lace, pin, and arrange all of this from the inside. In a very real sense, you are dressed the way one might dress a mannequin, standing more or less still while others work carefully around you. It is intimate, it is tedious, and it depends entirely on the labor of people who are not you. Once fully assembled, you are magnificent, nearly immobile, and slightly short of breath. You cannot bend easily, you cannot rush anywhere, you cannot dress or undress without assistance, and you cannot even fully lower your arms during the pinning process. You are, in the most literal sense, a walking display of wealth and status, which is, after all, precisely the intended effect. Your body has become a statement, and now it's time to paint that statement's face. With your body successfully upholstered, attention turns to your face, which fashion insists should be as pale as a freshly laundered bedsheet. To achieve this fashionably ghostly glow, ladies of your rank apply ceruse, a paste made from white lead mixed with vinegar. It goes on smooth. It looks striking and fashionably otherworldly, and it is, quietly and steadily, poisoning you with every single application. Over time, it damages the very skin it's meant to beautify, which then requires an even thicker layer of ceruse to conceal the damage. A beauty routine that functions exactly like quicksand. Add a touch of red to the lips and cheeks, and there you have it, radiant, fashionable, and gently absorbing heavy metal through your pores. Let's understand why pale skin is so prized in the first place. An unblemished, fair complexion signals that you have never labored outdoors under the sun like a common field worker. Paleness is visible proof of a life of leisure and elevated status. The whiter your face, the more clearly you announce that you are far too important to have ever done an honest day's outdoor work. It is, in essence, a flex written in lead across your cheekbones. Ceruse is prized because it genuinely works in the narrow sense that matters here. It creates a smooth, luminous, even surface that hides blemishes, scars, and the marks of illness beneath a flawless white mask. In a world without modern skincare, This is, in its own way, remarkably effective cosmetic technology. The one small catch, the tiny footnote everyone chooses to ignore, is that its main ingredient is a toxic heavy metal your skin steadily absorbs, leading over time to skin damage, hair loss, and worse. But in the meantime, your face looks extraordinary. So there is that. Here is the cruel loop at the center of it all. The lead damages the very skin it is meant to beautify, roughening and discoloring it over time. And the era's solution to damaged skin is naturally, more ceruse, applied even more thickly, to hide the harm caused by the previous application. You are treating the symptoms of the poison with more of the poison itself. It is a beauty regimen that slowly consumes the very thing it claims to enhance, and you reapply it faithfully anyway, because the alternative is appearing in public with an imperfect, bare face, which is simply unthinkable. The lips and cheeks receive their own separate treatment. Various tints and reds, some more questionable in origin than others, are used to add a flush of apparent life back into your carefully deadened complexion. The irony writes itself. You whiten your entire face to look pale and refined, then paint color back into specific spots to look alive again. You are, in effect, painting a healthy glow back onto a face you just went to considerable trouble to render corpse-like in the first place. None of this is optional for someone in your position. As a princess, your appearance is a matter of public presentation and national status, and looking the part is simply expected of you. So you sit patiently while this is applied, day after day, taking part fully in a ritual that everyone around you considers the very height of elegance, and that no one yet recognizes as slow, cumulative harm. The finest ladies of the realm all do exactly the same, quietly competing to be the palest, smoothest, most fashionably ghostly presence in any given room. And so you step out into your day beautifully painted, admired, entirely on trend, and being poisoned in slow cosmetic installments. The heavy metal does its quiet work beneath the surface while you smile graciously and accept compliments on your lovely complexion. It is a masterpiece of period beauty, ruinous and radiant in equal measure. Your face, at least, is perfect. Now we simply need to deal with the tremendous ongoing problem that is your hair. Now that your face is finished, your hair must be dealt with, and by dealt with, I mean hidden, restrained, and buried beneath an architectural marvel of fabric and wire. Depending on the fashion of the year, you might wear a gable hood, a stiff, sharply pointed structure shaped rather like the roof of a house, or the somewhat gentler French hood, which curves back softly over the head. Either way, your hair is scraped back, pinned firmly into submission and covered entirely, because loose, flowing hair is reserved for very specific occasions, coronations, weddings, and displays of unmarried purity. The headdress itself is heavy. It presses down on your skull, and by the end of the day you will feel it in your neck, your temples, and quite possibly your soul. Start with the gable hood, which earns its name honestly, since it genuinely resembles the pointed gable of a rooftop framing your face. It is stiff, structured, and entirely unforgiving. A rigid triangular arch of fabric stretched over wire that sits on your head rather like a small piece of architecture. It conceals essentially all of your hair, frames your painted face in severe geometric lines, and communicates modesty, piety, and status all at once. It also weighs on you like a small helmet, because structurally, that is more or less exactly what it is. The French hood, by contrast, is the more fashionable, somewhat more forgiving cousin. It sits further back on the head, curves gently, and reveals a modest sliver of hair at the front, which, by the standards of the day, is considered practically daring. It is thought more elegant, more continental, more flattering. But do not mistake more forgiving for comfortable. It remains a firm structure, pinned securely in place, still heavy, still something you wear rather than something you simply put on. Your neck notices it regardless of which style happens to be in vogue that season. Beneath whichever hood you're wearing, your actual hair endures its own separate ordeal. It is combed, parted, scraped tightly back, and pinned flat out of sight. The goal here is control and concealment, not display. Loose, flowing hair carries very specific meanings tied to youth, virginity, and particular ceremonial occasions. For ordinary daily life, a respectable woman's hair stays bound and hidden. So yours is wrestled into submission each morning and imprisoned beneath the headgear for the rest of the day. The weight is the part that wears on you most. These are not delicate little caps. They are constructed from stiffened fabric, wire, sometimes jewels and metal ornamentation, all balanced on your skull and anchored with pins that tug steadily at your scalp. Wear that through meals, through lessons, through audiences and prayers, and by evening you feel it as a dull, spreading ache. Your neck stiffens from holding your head just so. Your temples throb where the structure presses. It is a low, constant tax paid in exchange for looking correct. And correct is truly the point, because your headdress is not simply fashion. It is a statement of rank and virtue. The richness of the fabric, the quality of the ornamentation, the style itself, all broadcast information about exactly who you are and where you stand. To appear improperly covered or with your hair carelessly loose would be a lapse noticed and discussed at length. So you endure the weight and the ache, because being seen without the proper headdress is simply not something a princess does. By the time you're finally, mercifully unpinned each evening, the relief is enormous, a sudden lightness that is almost dizzying. Your scalp is tender, your neck is grateful, and the marks of the day's confinement linger faintly. Then tomorrow it all goes back on: the structure, the pins, the weight, all of it, because this is simply the price of a fashionable, respectable head. Your face is poisoned. Your hair is imprisoned. Now, at last, we might address the deeply neglected subject of washing. Let's talk about hygiene, or rather, the careful and deliberate avoidance of it. You might assume that a princess, of all people, bathed regularly in rose-scented water like something out of a painting. In reality, full immersion bathing is regarded with genuine suspicion, since many physicians believe hot water opens the body's pores and invites illness straight inside. So instead of bathing, you're wiped down with linen cloths, doused generously in perfume, and layered in scented powders to manage the situation diplomatically. Your fine garments are aired rather than washed. The overall effect is a princess who looks immaculate, smells overwhelmingly of violets, and underneath it all is quietly having a rather difficult time of things. The medical theory behind all this deserves appreciation for its sheer confident wrongness. It is widely believed that the body's pores function like little doors, and that hot water flings them wide open, allowing disease and corrupt vapors to rush in and take hold. Since illness genuinely is everywhere, and genuinely is deadly, avoiding anything believed to invite it seems, from inside the logic of the age, entirely reasonable. A full hot bath is treated not as refreshing self-care but as a risky medical event, something approached with caution rather than pleasure. In place of soaking, cleanliness is managed primarily through your linen. The smock, that simple underlayer worn against the skin, is understood to absorb sweat and grime. Changing it frequently is considered the proper, civilized way to stay clean. A fresh white smock signals cleanliness far more convincingly than a scrubbed body would. In this logic, you are clean because your linen is clean, and the linen does the work that we would now assign to soap and water. It is hygiene by laundry rather than hygiene by bathing. Then come the perfumes, applied with real enthusiasm and real purpose. Scented waters, fragrant oils, and perfumed powders mask body odor and create a pleasant impression. If you cannot easily wash a smell away, the next best strategy is to bury it beneath a stronger, nicer one. Violets, roses, and various herbal scents do the heavy lifting. You move through your day trailing fragrance, a walking bouquet arranged specifically to distract from what lies beneath the fine fabric. Your face and hands, being the parts most visibly on display, do receive regular attention, wiped and cleaned as needed. But the full-body soak we now consider entirely basic is, for you, a rare and deliberate undertaking rather than a routine habit. When bathing does happen, it is an event requiring water to be heated and hauled, a tub prepared, and a genuinely good reason to justify what is perceived as a real risk. It is closer to a scheduled medical procedure than to an ordinary morning habit. There is a certain irony in all of this, given how much effort goes into the rest of your appearance. You are painted, dressed in gorgeous fabric, adorned, and presented as the very pinnacle of refinement, all while the underlying matter of washing is handled with cloths and cover-ups. The gap between how you look and how a modern nose might actually experience you is, to put it gently, considerable. You are the height of elegance from a distance, and a rather more complicated situation up close, held together by fresh linen and a devoted commitment to violets. And here is the thing. You do not consider yourself dirty in the slightest, and neither does anyone around you. By the standards of your own world, frequent linen changes and diligent perfuming are precisely what cleanliness looks like. Everyone operates under the same understanding, so no one is offended, and no one thinks twice. By the measure of your own age, you are a fastidiously clean and fragrant princess. Now let's ruin the illusion a little further by opening your mouth and examining your teeth. Let's peek behind that polite royal smile, because it is hiding a small catastrophe. Sugar has recently arrived in England, and it is wildly expensive, which naturally means the wealthy cannot get enough of it. As a princess, you eat sugared fruits, sugared cakes, and sugar molded into elaborate decorative sculptures purely for show. You may even be given it as a supposed medicine. The predictable result is that your teeth begin rotting at an impressively steady rate. Some fashionable people even blacken their teeth deliberately, to signal that they are wealthy enough to have ruined their own smile with sugar. Your grin, once bright, becomes a quiet status symbol of decay. Consider how prized sugar is in your world. It is imported, costly, and therefore desirable in the way only genuinely expensive things can be. To serve sugar generously is to display wealth, generosity, and sophistication all at once. It appears at grand feasts molded into elaborate shapes, spun into decorations, worked into fantastical edible centerpieces designed to impress your guests. Access to this much sugar is reserved for the very top of society, and you sit firmly at that top. So you consume it constantly, in quantities that would alarm any modern dentist into early retirement. Sweet dishes, candied fruits, sugared spices, and confections of every description flow through your diet, both because you can afford them and because indulging in them announces loudly that you can. Even your medicines may be sweetened, on the cheerful assumption that anything so pleasant and expensive must surely also be good for you. The consequences arrive right on schedule and take up permanent residence in your mouth. Without any real understanding of dental hygiene as we know it, and awash in sugar, your teeth decay, cavities form, and rot sets in with grim reliability. There is no toothpaste in the modern sense, no dentist to catch problems early, and no notion whatsoever that the beloved sugar itself might be the culprit. You simply eat what your status demands and watch, or rather, feel, your teeth pay the price over the years. Here is the detail that captures the whole absurd spiral perfectly. Because decayed, blackened teeth become associated specifically with the sugar only the wealthy can afford, rotting teeth actually become fashionable. A mouthful of visible decay signals that you are rich enough to have ruined it. Some people reportedly go so far as to blacken perfectly healthy teeth on purpose, faking the look of expensive ruin. Tooth decay transforms, in this strange logic, from an unfortunate ailment into an aspirational status symbol. Your damaged smile becomes, in its own way, a luxury item. The pain, of course, does not care about fashion trends. Toothache in your world is a serious, recurring misery, and the available treatments are crude at best. There is no gentle filling, no careful repair. The remedy for a badly rotten tooth is usually simple extraction, performed without anesthesia by someone whose qualifications may be generous to describe as medical. So beneath the fashionable decay lies genuine, throbbing agony, endured because there is little else to be done about it. Your royal smile, which ought to be one of your great natural assets, becomes instead a quiet testament to both your privilege and your suffering, all at once. You eat the finest, sweetest food available to anyone in England, and your teeth crumble in gratitude. You may even style the damage as desirable. It is a perfect small parable of wealth in your age, where the very indulgences that mark you as important are also, quietly, the ones wrecking you. Speaking of indulgence, let's move on to the rest of your remarkably tooth-destroying diet. It is time to eat, and unlike the peasants beyond your palace walls, you will eat extremely well, which comes with its own quiet set of consequences. Your table groans under roasted meats, game birds, fish, fine white bread, and spiced wine, because vegetables are considered peasant food and largely beneath your station. Fresh fruit, meanwhile, is treated with real suspicion as a possible cause of illness. So you dine on a rich, heavy, meat-forward parade of dishes from morning until night, served to you on bended knee by attendants, tasted first by someone else in case of poison. It is a feast that looks magnificent and leaves your body quietly wondering when, if ever, it might encounter something green. Let's begin with the sheer dominance of meat on your table. Roasted, boiled, baked, and stewed, the flesh of nearly every available creature appears before you in staggering abundance, from beef and mutton to an impressive variety of birds, some of which might surprise you to find on a plate at all. Meat is the food of status, the centerpiece of any respectable meal, and the more of it and the greater its variety, the grander the overall display. Your diet is built around it, day after day, in quantities that reflect your rank far more than your actual appetite. Fine white bread joins the meat as its own marker of privilege. While poorer households eat coarse, dark loaves bulked out with whatever grain happens to be cheap that season, you eat the palest, most refined bread available, made from carefully processed flour. The whiteness of your bread is itself a quiet daily statement, a small, edible reminder that you have access to the very best. Add spiced wine and other rich drinks flavored with expensive imported spices, and your table becomes a full showcase of everything that money and rank can command. Now let's address the conspicuous absence of vegetables, which are viewed with faint disdain at your table. Greens, roots, and humble garden produce are associated with the diet of the poor, who eat such things out of pure necessity. For someone of your standing to fill up on vegetables would be seen as an almost embarrassing failure to eat according to your station. So while a peasant munching turnips is unknowingly absorbing a fair bit of actual nutrition, you, dining on your magnificent meats, are elegantly avoiding it entirely. Fresh fruit fares little better, regarded with genuine medical suspicion as a possible cause of illness, particularly when eaten raw. The prevailing wisdom holds that raw fruit can unbalance the body and invite disease, so it is usually cooked heavily, preserved in sugar, or simply avoided. Between the disdain for vegetables and the wariness toward fresh fruit, your gloriously rich diet quietly omits many of the very things that would keep a body running smoothly. The rituals surrounding your meals are just as elaborate as the food itself. Dishes arrive with real ceremony. Attendants serve you with visible deference, sometimes kneeling, and before anything reaches your lips, someone else may taste it first, to guard against poison. Eating, for you, is not a simple act of nourishment but a small performance of status conducted under careful protocol. Even your daily bread arrives wrapped in ritual, a reminder at every single meal of exactly who you are and how carefully you must be protected. So you eat like royalty, which is to say richly, heavily, and in some ways quietly disastrously. The magnificent parade of meats, sweets, and fine bread that marks your privilege also weighs on your health in ways nobody around you quite connects to the food itself. You are surrounded by the very best that the age has to offer, and are, ironically, missing much of what a body actually needs. It is abundance without balance, splendor purchased at the cost of nutrition. Now that the food is in front of you, brace yourself, because eating it correctly is an absolute minefield of etiquette. There are rules for how you sit, how you hold your posture, which fingers may touch which foods, and the precise, unspoken choreography of who is served before whom. You must never appear greedy, hurried, or, heaven forbid, visibly hungry. Every gesture is watched and silently catalogued by a room full of people filing your manners away for later conversation. A fork, incidentally, is still something of a novelty item you may not even own. So you eat delicately, gracefully, mostly with your fingers and a knife, performing refinement like it's a competitive sport. Begin with your body, because how you hold yourself at the table matters enormously. You must sit upright, composed, and controlled, your posture reflecting your breeding and your rank. Slumping, fidgeting, or leaning back is simply unthinkable. This is made somewhat easier by the rigid clothing already holding you at attention, but the expected discipline goes well beyond what the corset alone provides. Your entire bearing must communicate refinement, restraint, and total self-command, even during the simple act of reaching for a dish. Then there are your hands, and the surprisingly detailed rules governing them. In an age where the fork remains a curious foreign novelty most people simply don't use, you eat largely with your fingers and a knife, which means the precise manner of using your fingers becomes something of a fine art. Certain fingers are used for certain foods, others kept deliberately clean, and food is taken neatly, never grabbed. Eating gracefully with your fingers without mess or apparent greed requires genuine skill and constant, quiet attention. The order of service carries its own elaborate hierarchy. Who is served first? Who receives the finest cuts? Who is offered which particular dish? All of it follows the strict ranking of the room, and precedence is everything. The choreography of a formal meal maps the entire social order directly onto the dinner table with real precision. As a princess, you occupy an elevated place in this sequence, but you must also understand and respect it perfectly, because a misstep in precedence is a genuine social error, never a trivial oversight. Above all, you must never appear to actually want the food in front of you. Showing hunger, eating quickly, or betraying real appetite would be seen as deeply unrefined, a lapse into the common appetites of ordinary people. The ideal is to eat with detached elegance, as though nourishment were almost beside the point, and the meal's true purpose were a graceful performance of dining. You take modest portions, eat with visible restraint, and project the serene impression that you could take or leave the entire affair, whatever your stomach might privately think about that. Throughout it all, you are watched constantly and thoroughly by attendants, by companions, by anyone present in the room. Your table manners are under ongoing public assessment, and any slip, any clumsy gesture, any breach of etiquette will be noticed and very likely discussed afterward. Meals are not private refueling stops but public exhibitions of your breeding and self-command. Every bite is, in its own small way, evidence entered into the court's endless quiet record of who behaves exactly as they should. So dining, which ought to be one of life's genuinely simple pleasures, becomes for you a demanding performance requiring skill, discipline, and unrelenting composure. You navigate the fingers and the knife, the posture and the precedence, the careful projection of graceful indifference, all under a room full of watching eyes. It is exhausting in its own quiet way, a test conducted 3 or more times daily. And having mastered the elaborate business of eating properly, you might hope for some relief in your studies, which, as it turns out, come with their own relentless demands. Let's move to your education, which, to be fair, is genuinely one of the better parts of being a Tudor princess, and also entirely relentless. Unlike most girls of your era, you are actually taught and taught extremely well. Latin, Greek, French, Italian, theology, music, needlework, and the endless, exacting art of courtly conduct. Your tutors are among the finest scholars available anywhere, and expectations are enormous. You will translate texts, memorize scripture, and be paraded out regularly to demonstrate your learning to visiting dignitaries, like a very expensive performing marvel. It is an extraordinary education for the time, delivered with all the warmth of a military drill. Let's start by appreciating just how genuinely rare this is. Most girls in your era receive little to no formal schooling at all, their education limited to household skills and perhaps some very basic reading. You, by contrast, are given access to the leading minds of the age, and a curriculum that would challenge many grown scholars. This is not because anyone particularly wants you to enjoy learning for its own sake, but because a princess must be accomplished, cultured, and impressive, a credit to her house, and a suitable ornament for whatever future court she may one day marry into. Your mind, in a sense, is being furnished the same way your wardrobe is stocked, for display. The languages alone are formidable. Latin is essential, the language of scholarship, diplomacy, and the church. Greek marks you as genuinely, seriously learned. French and Italian are the tongues of the fashionable continental courts you may eventually marry into. You're expected not merely to stumble through these, but to read, write, and converse in them with real fluency. Imagine the sheer number of hours spent drilling, conjugating, and translating across several languages simultaneously, all while managing everything else your position demands of you. Theology and scripture occupy a central place in your studies, and not as some gentle moral footnote. Religious knowledge is serious, weighty, and in your world deeply politically charged. You memorize passages, study doctrine, and are expected to hold your own in matters of faith, because a princess must be visibly, defensibly pious. In a court where the official religion can shift with the wind, your theological education functions as both spiritual foundation and a kind of armor, arming you to demonstrate correct devotion whenever it is required of you. Then come the so-called softer accomplishments, though softer does not mean easier. Music, whether singing or playing an instrument, is expected of any refined lady, and you practice until you can perform gracefully on command. Needlework, that endless companion of noble women, is drilled into you as both a skill and a virtue simultaneously. And woven through everything is constant instruction in courtly conduct, precisely how to speak, move, bow, and behave in every conceivable situation you might encounter. Your education is not merely academic. It is comprehensive, shaping the entirety of you into a polished courtly product. Your tutors, learned and demanding, hold you to standards that leave very little room for laziness or excuse. The expectations placed on you are immense, and the pressure behind them is entirely real. You are not learning purely for your own quiet enrichment, but to meet the requirements of your station, and to reflect well on everyone responsible for your upbringing. A princess who cannot perform her learning convincingly is, in the eyes of her family, a failure of investment. So the drilling is thorough, and tolerance for shortcomings is thin. And perform your learning you must, because a well-educated princess doubles as a diplomatic asset to be shown off. Visiting dignitaries and ambassadors may be treated to a live demonstration of your accomplishments. Your languages, your knowledge, your grace, evidence of your quality, laid out for careful inspection. You become, in a sense, a living exhibit of your family's sophistication. It is a remarkable education, genuinely one most people of your era could never have dreamed of. And it is also, simultaneously, a duty, an expectation, and a performance. And speaking of performances demanded by your station, few are as constant or as closely watched as your religious devotion. Faith, for you, is not a private matter. It is a very public, very mandatory, very scheduled obligation. Your day is threaded with prayer, chapel attendance, and religious observance, and your piety is not optional decoration. It is watched, recorded, and when necessary, weaponized politically. In a court where the official religion of the entire country can shift with a monarch's changing convictions, praying the wrong way, in the wrong language, to the wrong saint, could quietly mark you as dangerous. So you kneel, you observe, you demonstrate flawless devotion, and you learn very early that your soul is also, in its own way, a matter of state. Consider the sheer rhythm of it. Your day is structured around religious observance, with set times for prayer and regular chapel attendance woven into your schedule as firmly as meals or lessons. Devotion is not something you fit in whenever you feel moved to it, but a fixed, recurring duty performed whether or not your heart happens to be in it that particular morning. You kneel at the appointed hours. You attend the appointed services. The entire shape of your day bends around the expectation of visible, consistent piety. And visible is very much the operative word here, because your faith functions as public performance just as much as private conviction. People notice how devoutly you pray, how faithfully you attend, how correctly you observe each ritual. Your piety becomes part of your reputation, evidence of your virtue, and your fitness for the role you occupy. So you must be seen to be devout, not merely feel it quietly within yourself. A princess whose religious observance appears lax or careless invites unwelcome comment almost immediately. The stakes climb sharply when you consider the genuinely volatile religious landscape of your world. The official religion of the realm is not some settled, permanent fixture, but something that can shift dramatically depending on who happens to wear the crown and what that person believes. Forms of worship considered correct and safe under one monarch can become suspect, even dangerous under the next. This means the way you pray is never merely a spiritual choice, but a political position, one that can align you with power or quietly place you at odds with it. This places you in a genuinely precarious spot, especially when the religious tide turns. You may have been raised in one form of faith, only to find the ground shifting beneath you, the observances of your childhood suddenly recast as problematic or even suspect. Navigating this requires real care, discretion, and constant awareness of the current political climate. Your soul, which ought to be the most personal thing you possess, becomes instead entangled with the politics of the realm, monitored for conformity and read for hidden meaning. So you observe your faith diligently, correctly, and visibly, threading your days with prayer and chapel attendance, demonstrating a devotion beyond reproach. You do this partly, one hopes, out of genuine belief, but also out of necessity because in your world, piety functions as safety, and the appearance of devotion serves as a shield. Your relationship with the divine is inescapably also a relationship with the state. It is one more arena in which you are watched and quietly judged. And watching and judging, as it happens, is very much the specialty of the women who surround you day and night. Let's discuss your companions, the ladies who attend you constantly, and who are, in almost no sense you would recognize, actually your friends. They dress you, entertain you, sleep near you, and follow you everywhere you go. Yet nearly every one of them has been placed at your side by an ambitious family hopping to gain influence through simple proximity to you. They report your moods, your words, and your small slips to interested parties elsewhere at court. Genuine friendship is a dangerous luxury because anyone close enough to comfort you is also close enough to betray you. You are never physically alone, and yet, in the way that matters most, you are entirely by yourself. Consider what these women actually do day to day. On the surface, it looks very much like devoted companionship. They attend to your needs, help you dress, keep you company through the long hours, accompany you as you move about the palace, and share your chambers at night. They are present for nearly every moment of your waking life, and quite a few of your sleeping ones as well. To an outside eye, you appear surrounded by attentive, loyal friends, a princess perpetually accompanied by a warm circle of affectionate ladies. The reality underneath is considerably colder. Consider how these women came to be at your side in the first place. A position attending a princess is a genuine prize, eagerly sought after by noble families who understand perfectly well that proximity to you means proximity to power and influence. A daughter placed in your household represents an investment, a foothold, a potential channel to royal favor. So the ladies around you are often present not because they chose you or you chose them, but because their families maneuvered them carefully into place. Their presence, in other words, serves ambitions that have very little to do with your own happiness. This means that much of what they observe about you eventually travels outward. Your moods, your careless remarks, your friendships, your health, your slips of temper or judgment, all of it counts as information, and information is currency at any court. A lady who can report useful details about you back to her family, or to some interested faction, becomes valuable to them in her own right. So the women who know you most intimately are, in many cases, also quietly relaying what they learn elsewhere. Your daily life is gently, continuously observed by the very same people who help lace you into your gown each morning. The result is that genuine friendship becomes a genuinely perilous thing to indulge in. To truly confide in someone, to let your guard down and speak freely, is to hand them something they could use against you, whether they intend to or not. The closer you allow someone to get, the more they come to know, and the more they know, the more dangerous they potentially become, should loyalties shift or pressures mount elsewhere. Trust, that ordinary foundation of friendship most people take for granted, becomes a luxury you can scarcely afford, because the cost of misplacing it can be genuinely severe. And so you learn to hold yourself apart, even while perpetually surrounded. You remain courteous, warm even, fully engaged in the pleasant surface of companionship, but you guard your true thoughts closely underneath it all. You cannot fully relax. You cannot speak entirely freely. You cannot lean on these women the way one leans on a genuine friend. You perform intimacy while quietly withholding the real thing, maintaining a careful distance beneath the appearance of closeness. It is, in its own way, a lonely manner of living, all the lonelier for being so thoroughly crowded. The deep irony of your existence is captured perfectly here. You are almost never physically alone, always attended, always accompanied, your solitude a genuine rarity. And yet, in the sense that matters most, the ability to trust, to confide, to be truly known and supported, you remain profoundly isolated. The crowd around you is not the comfort it appears to be from the outside, so you fill your endless hours in company that is watchful rather than warm, and you fill them, more often than not, with the quiet, respectable, ever-present labor of the needle. Embroidery is considered the ideal pursuit for a lady of your station, a display of patience, virtue, and refinement, all stitched carefully into a cushion nobody actually asked for. You will spend astonishing amounts of time hunched over fabric, threading tiny, elegant patterns, while your ladies read aloud or play music somewhere nearby. It is calming, it is respectable, and it is used to fill your schedule with wholesome, decorous activity, so that you are never, under any circumstances, left with too much idle time to think for yourself. Needlework looms so large in your life for good reason. It is regarded as the quintessential feminine accomplishment, a skill every well-bred lady is expected to possess and display. It signals virtue, because it keeps idle hands productively busy. It signals patience, because it demands long, careful attention over many hours. It signals refinement, because the finest work is genuinely intricate and beautiful. For a lady of your rank, skill with a needle is not optional but expected, a fundamental part of what it means to be an accomplished woman worthy of her station. So you sew, and you sew a great deal. The hours you spend bent over fabric, working thread into pattern after pattern, would genuinely astonish anyone accustomed to modern leisure. This is not an occasional pleasant hobby, but a major, recurring occupation of your days, filling stretches of time that might otherwise hang empty and unstructured. You produce cushions, hangings, decorative pieces, elaborate designs, stitch by painstaking stitch, and the sheer volume of your output reflects just how much of your life is quietly given over to this respectable, repetitive task. The setting for all this stitching has its own gentle rhythm. As you work, your ladies gather around you, and the time fills with reading aloud, perhaps from devotional or improving texts, or with music played softly nearby. It is a picture of calm, cultured femininity, a group of women occupied with wholesome pursuits, the air filled with quiet voices and pleasant sound. There is real serenity in it, a soothing, orderly quality, and on a good day it may even feel genuinely agreeable, a peaceful island floating inside an otherwise watchful world. But let's be honest about the deeper function of all this diligent stitching, which is control every bit as much as accomplishment. Filling your hours with structured, decorous activity ensures you are never left too long with nothing to occupy your mind. Idle time in the thinking of the age is dangerous, an opening for restlessness, mischief, or worse, independent thought. A princess kept busy with virtuous needlework is a princess safely occupied, her attention channeled into something harmless and appropriate rather than left to wander toward questions or discontents. There is something quietly telling in this. The endless embroidery is not merely about producing lovely objects, though it certainly does that, but about shaping how you spend your inner life. By filling your days with acceptable, absorbing, undemanding work, those around you gently ensure your energies flow into approved channels. Your mind, sharp and well-educated as it is given a great deal of thread to occupy it instead. The calm of the needle is also, in its way, a kind of containment, elegant, and entirely unremarkable to anyone watching. So you stitch hour upon hour, producing genuinely beautiful work, embodying the patient virtue expected of you, surrounded by soft voices and quiet music, kept serenely and thoroughly occupied. It is a pursuit both genuinely pleasant and quietly purposeful, filling the time, steadying the days. Whether you find real solace in it or simply endure it, the needle remains a constant companion through your confined existence. But not every hour is spent indoors bent over fabric, because on occasion, gloriously, you are permitted to go outside and chase things. Let's step outside for once, because your leisure isn't entirely limited to poking cloth with a needle. Hunting and hawking are prized royal pursuits, and as a princess, you are expected to ride, to follow the chase, and to admire a well-flown falcon with genuine appreciation. On the surface, this sounds like glorious freedom, wind in your hair, galloping across the estate. In practice, you ride side saddle in heavy layers, your outings are carefully arranged and closely attended, and even your recreation becomes a performance of grace and status. Still, for a brief, shining hour, you are moving. You are outdoors. And no one is currently fitting you into anything made of whalebone. Consider the prestige of these pursuits first, because hunting and hawking are never mere pastimes but genuine marks of high status. The chase is a noble tradition, an activity of kings and courtiers, and taking part in it signals your rank and your fitness for elevated society. Hawking especially, the art of flying trained birds of prey, is an aristocratic accomplishment surrounded by its own elaborate lore and etiquette. To ride out and participate is to take part in something quintessentially royal, and so it is expected of you every bit as much as it is permitted. The riding itself offers a rare and genuine physical liberty. To be on horseback, moving across open ground, following the hunt through the estate, is about as free as your body is ever allowed to feel. After the confinement of stiff clothing, watchful chambers, and endless indoor hours, the sensation of motion and open air must feel almost intoxicating. There is real pleasure here, the thrill of the horse beneath you, the drama of the chase, the beauty of a falcon climbing into open sky. For a while, you are participating in something vivid and genuinely alive. But let's not overstate the freedom, because it comes carefully bounded on every side. You ride side saddle, a manner of riding dictated by modesty and propriety, which limits your movement and control compared to how a man might ride the same horse. You remain dressed in your heavy layers. Because a princess does not shed her finery or her dignity even for sport, and you remain, as ever, attended, your outing arranged and accompanied by others whose presence ensures both your safety and your proper conduct. Even at a full gallop, you are never truly unsupervised. The whole affair, in fact, remains a performance of grace and status, even as it offers a genuine taste of release. How you sit your horse, how you conduct yourself in the field, how gracefully you admire the sport, all of it reflects on you, and all of it is observed accordingly. You are expected to display the poise and refinement appropriate to your rank, to be elegant even in recreation. The hunt becomes an occasion to be seen behaving beautifully outdoors, every bit as much as an occasion to actually enjoy yourself. And yet, for all these qualifications, the value of these outings should not be dismissed. In a life so heavily hemmed in by walls, watchers, and rigid routine, the chance to be outdoors in motion, engaged in something genuinely exciting, is precious. The fresh air, the exercise, the change of scene, the sheer novelty of doing something active, all of it offers a real reprieve from the confinement defining so much of your existence. For a brief, bright interval, the usual constraints loosen their grip, even if they never fully let go. So you seize these hours gladly, riding out to follow the chase or watch a falcon stoop, tasting a freedom that is real if incomplete. It is one of the more genuinely enjoyable duties of your station, a pursuit that is expected of you, and that also happens to be a pleasure. When the ride ends, of course, you return to the layers and the watchers, but you carry the memory of open air with you. And now we must turn from the pleasant chase to the far weightier chase, in which you are not the hunter but the prize. Now we arrive at the true purpose of your entire existence, the thing every part of your upbringing has quietly been building toward, your marriage. From the moment of your birth, you have been a diplomatic asset, a living treaty waiting to be negotiated with foreign kings and princes. Your betrothal might be arranged while you're still a small child, promised to a boy you have never met, in a country you've never seen. These arrangements are made, broken, and remade constantly as alliances shift. This means you may find yourself engaged several times over, to several different men, none of whom you chose, all before you're even fully grown. Let's be clear-eyed about what you fundamentally represent in the calculations of your world. You are, above all, a means of forging alliances between powers. A princess's marriage can seal a treaty, cement friendship between two realms, secure a contested border, or gain a valuable ally in a dangerous world. Your hand in marriage is therefore a diplomatic instrument of real weight, something rulers negotiate over exactly as they would negotiate any other matter of state. Everything about how you've been raised, educated, and presented has been oriented toward making you a fitting and valuable bride when the moment finally arrives. The negotiations over your future often begin astonishingly early. It is entirely possible for your betrothal to be arranged while you're still a small child, your marriage decided upon and formalized in agreements long before you have any real capacity to understand or consent to it. You might be promised to a boy who is himself still a child, or to a grown man in some distant land, as part of a larger diplomatic arrangement. Your consent is simply not a factor here, because you are not, in this context, a person choosing a partner. You are an asset being allocated, and these arrangements are anything but stable. Alliances shift, political winds change direction, wars break out and eventually end. A betrothal that made perfect sense one year may become inconvenient or even actively undesirable the next. So engagements are made and unmade with a frequency that would be genuinely dizzying if it concerned anyone with a say in the matter. You may find yourself promised first to one prince, then, when circumstances change, to another, and perhaps to a third after that. Your marital destiny revised repeatedly according to the shifting needs of the moment. Consider what it means to actually live through this. You may grow up knowing you are to marry a particular distant figure, forming some vague mental picture of your future, only to have that future quietly dissolved and replaced the moment diplomacy changes course. The men to whom you become attached come and go on the tides of politics, none of them chosen by you, some of them never even met in person. Your sense of what your life will actually look like remains perpetually provisional, subject to revision by decisions made in rooms you will never enter, over matters you cannot influence in the slightest. There is a strange, dehumanizing quality to being so thoroughly an object of negotiation. Foreign ambassadors assess your value. Your dowry is haggled over at length. Your suitability is weighed carefully against political advantage. All of it unfolds as though you were a particularly fine piece of property being brought carefully to market. Your personal desires, your feelings, your own preferences simply do not enter into the calculation. So this, then, is the true purpose beneath all the lessons, the manners, and the finery. The reason you have been so carefully cultivated from birth. You are a piece in a vast and serious game played by kings, your marriage a card to be played for advantage. Everything has prepared you for a union you will not choose, to a man selected entirely for reasons of state. It is a heavy destiny to carry, made heavier still by the waiting it so often involves, waiting for a stranger whose face you may know only from a flattering painting. Since your marriage is fundamentally a matter of statecraft rather than romance, let's talk about the genuinely surreal experience of waiting for a husband you have never actually laid eyes on. Portraits are exchanged, though these tend to be flattering to the point of fiction, so the charming young man in the painting may bear only passing resemblance to the actual groom waiting at the other end of the negotiation. Ambassadors haggle over your dowry as though you were livestock at market. You wait and wait, while distant men debate your future in rooms you are not permitted to enter. And there is always the real possibility that after years of waiting, the entire arrangement collapses over politics, forcing you to begin all over again. Let's start with the portraits, those small painted windows onto your possible future. When a match is being considered across distances too great for the two parties to simply meet in person, images are exchanged so that each side can form some impression of the other. A painting of your intended is sent for your family to review, and one of you travels the opposite way. It is, in theory, a sensible enough system, allowing some impression to form before commitments are finalized. In practice, it opens up a rich opportunity for artful and occasionally shameless misrepresentation, because these portraits, shall we say, tend to be generous. A painter commissioned to depict a prospective spouse understands perfectly well that his work is a piece of diplomacy meant to please and to flatter. So the resulting image leans toward the idealized, smoothing away flaws, enhancing charms, presenting the subject in the most appealing possible light. The dashing figure you study so carefully in the painting may prove, upon actual meeting, to be considerably less dashing in the flesh. You are, in essence, being courted by an optimistic advertisement rather than an honest likeness. While the images travel back and forth, the real business grinds on, conducted with all the romance of a commercial transaction. Ambassadors and negotiators haggle over the terms of your marriage, chief among them your dowry, the wealth and property that will accompany you to your husband's court. Sums are proposed and countered. Conditions are set. Advantages are weighed carefully against each other. Your value is, quite literally, quantified and bargained over, your future settled through the same kind of hard negotiation one might expect over land or trade goods. You are the subject of the deal, not a party to it. And through all of this, your own role is simply to wait. The discussions happen elsewhere, among men in rooms and councils from which you are entirely excluded. Your fate is being determined, sometimes over long stretches of time, and you have no seat whatsoever at the table where it is decided. You wait to learn whether the match will proceed, whom exactly you will marry, and when dependent entirely on the outcome of negotiations, you have no ability to influence. The waiting can stretch on for years, and it carries a persistent undertone of uncertainty, because these arrangements remain vulnerable to collapse at any moment. A shift in the political situation, a change of alliance, a fresh conflict, or simply a new and more attractive opportunity. Any of these can cause a match to fall apart after long, careful negotiation. All that waiting, all that anticipation of a particular future can simply evaporate, leaving you back at the beginning. A fresh round of portraits, haggling and waiting, commencing all over again for some new prospect. So you exist in a strange state of suspended anticipation, awaiting a husband who is, to you, little more than a flattering painting and a name inside a negotiation, uncertain whether this match or the next one will finally be the one that holds. The man who will shape the rest of your life remains, for now, a stranger glimpsed only through diplomacy and idealized portraiture, while your future is quietly bartered in distant rooms you will never see. And all of this unfolds within a court that is itself a treacherous tangle of competing interests. Now that you understand your value as a pawn, let's examine the board you actually sit on, because the Tudor court is a seething tangle of rival factions, all maneuvering constantly for power. Families rise and fall based entirely on the monarch's favor, and everyone around you is quietly calculating exactly how you might prove useful or dangerous to their own ambitions. A kind word directed at the wrong noble, a warm glance toward the wrong faction, and you may have accidentally made enemies who never forget. You must learn to read a room the way a general reads a battlefield, to trust almost no one, and to smile pleasantly at people who would happily see your entire household ruined. Let's begin with the fundamental nature of the court, which is not the glittering social gathering it might appear to be from the outside, but a fierce, ongoing competition for power and favor. Great families and ambitious individuals jockey constantly for position, influence, and access to the monarch, who serves as the ultimate source of all advancement. This competition organizes itself naturally into factions, shifting alliances of mutual interest that support one another and oppose their rivals. Beneath the elegant surface of courtly life runs a relentless current of ambition, rivalry, and maneuvering that never truly stops, not even for a single day. The stakes of this competition are enormous, because in your world, the favor of the monarch determines essentially everything. A family in favor rises, gaining wealth, titles, offices, and influence almost overnight. A family that falls from favor can lose all of it, sometimes catastrophically and without warning. So the maneuvering you witness constantly around you is not idle politics, but a genuine matter of fortunes and futures, pursued with corresponding intensity by everyone involved. Everyone around you is playing this game, whether openly or subtly, and the game itself admits no timeouts. Within this environment, you are a significant piece, and everyone around you knows it perfectly well. Your rank, your potential marriage, your proximity to the throne, all of it makes you an object of intense interest to every faction at court. Some will see you as a route to advancement, someone worth cultivating, befriending, or aligning with. Others may see you instead as a threat, an obstacle, or a rival to their own preferred candidates and schemes. Either way, you are being constantly assessed, your usefulness and your danger calculated by ambitious minds on every side. This makes your every interaction genuinely fraught with hidden significance. A friendly word to a particular noble, an apparent warmth toward one faction over another, even a stray glance or gesture, can be read as a signal of allegiance, aligning you, in the eyes of watchful observers, with one side against another. You may make enemies without ever intending to, simply by seeming to favor the wrong people at the wrong moment. And enemies made at court are not easily unmade, because the rivalries here run deep, and the memories involved are very long. A careless moment can produce consequences that follow you for years. So you must learn to navigate this treacherous ground with real care, reading the room the way a commander might read a battlefield. You need to understand who stands with whom, where the currents of power are currently flowing, which alliances are rising and which are quietly crumbling. You must weigh your words and your gestures constantly, always aware of how they might be interpreted and later used against you. Trust becomes something extended only sparingly and cautiously, because so many of those around you have interests that may not align with your own, however pleasantly they happen to smile at you. And smile you must at all of them, including those who would gladly see you brought low given the chance. Courtly life demands a polished surface of grace and civility, maintained regardless of the ambitions churning underneath. You greet rivals warmly. You exchange pleasantries with people actively scheming against your interests. You betray none of the weariness you privately feel. It is a constant, exhausting performance of composure layered over caution. Mastering this dangerous social terrain is essential to your survival, because everything at court ultimately flows from a single source, the one person whose mood governs your entire fate. Let's talk about the single most important weather system in your life, which is not the sky but your father, the king. Royal favor is everything, and it is astonishingly fragile. A monarch's affection can warm you generously one week and freeze you out entirely the next, depending on politics, marriage negotiations, religion, or simple, ordinary temper. When you're in favor, you enjoy fine apartments, generous allowances, and a place of genuine honor. When you fall out of it, your household quietly shrinks, your allowance vanishes, and you may be moved somewhere considerably less comfortable to think about whatever it is you're assumed to have done, even if, in reality, you've done nothing at all. Let's establish just how total the monarch's power over your life truly is. The king stands as the ultimate authority, the single source from which all favor, wealth, and status flow, and your entire position depends on standing well in his estimation. This is your father, yes, but he is first and foremost a monarch, and his relationship to you is shaped by matters of state far more than by ordinary paternal affection. His regard determines the shape and comfort of your entire existence, and that regard is not a fixed, reliable thing, but something that shifts constantly with circumstance and temperament alike. Consider the many forces capable of moving the royal mood. Politics can transform you overnight from an asset into a liability. A shift in the marriage negotiations that define your worth can raise or lower you sharply in his estimation. Changes in religion, always volatile in your world, can suddenly render your position awkward or even suspect. And beyond all these weighty matters lies simple temper, the ordinary human moods of a powerful man, which can affect how you're treated regardless of anything you have actually done. You remain subject to all of it, with very little ability to influence any part of it yourself. When you enjoy the king's favor, life is genuinely good, or at least as good as your confined and watched existence allows it to be. You're housed in fine apartments, granted generous allowances to maintain yourself in appropriate style, given a place of honor and visible respect. Your household is well staffed, your needs comfortably met, your dignity affirmed at every turn. You occupy the position your rank should command, treated as the valued princess you genuinely are. In these times, the arrangement of your daily life reflects your closeness to the source of all good things at court. But let favor withdraw, and the transformation arrives swiftly and starkly. Your household may be reduced, attendance dismissed. Your entire establishment shrunk to something far more modest than before. Your allowance can dwindle or dry up completely, leaving you to manage on considerably less. You may be moved to lesser accommodations, quietly removed from the center of court life, your reduced circumstances a visible signal to everyone of your fall. The whole apparatus of your comfort and status contracts, and everyone at court reads the change accurately, understanding at once that you have slipped in the royal regard. The cruelest feature of all this is how little your own conduct may actually have to do with it. You can find yourself out of favor through absolutely no fault of your own, caught up in political shifts, marital calculations, or religious changes that have nothing to do with your own behavior. You may have done everything correctly and still find yourself frozen out, simply because the winds have changed direction. Punishment, or its equivalent in withdrawn comforts and diminished standing, can fall upon you for reasons entirely beyond your control, leaving you to endure a fall you did absolutely nothing to earn. So you live perpetually attuned to the royal mood, watchful of the king's regard the way one might anxiously watch a changeable sky before a journey. Your fortunes rise and fall with his favor, and that favor remains fragile, unpredictable, and only partly connected to anything you yourself can affect. It is an unsettling way to exist, your comfort and dignity held hostage to the temperament and calculations of one supremely powerful man. And that same power, capable of merely diminishing you, also holds the far more terrifying capacity to unmake you entirely, to strip away the very title that defines who you are. Now for a particularly Tudor flavor of nightmare, one that is not exaggeration for dramatic effect, but simply what actually happened to real women. Your very status as a princess can be revoked with nothing more than the stroke of a pen. If your parents' marriage is annulled or declared invalid after the fact, you can be officially reclassified as illegitimate, stripped of your title, and demoted from princess to a considerably lesser rank almost overnight. Your household shrinks. Your prospects collapse, and you are expected to accept the whole thing gracefully. You might spend years living as a so-called bastard, only to be quietly restored to favor later, whenever it happens to suit the crown's purposes. Your identity itself, it turns out, remains entirely at the mercy of politics. Let's begin with the actual mechanism, because it hinges entirely on the fragile foundation of your parents' marriage. Your status as a legitimate princess rests completely on the validity of the union that produced you. If that marriage is annulled, declared to have never been lawful in the first place, then, in the cold logic of the law, you cease to be the legitimate offspring of a valid marriage at all. And a marriage can indeed be challenged and undone, particularly when a monarch has powerful reasons to wish it so. Your legitimacy, it turns out, is not a fixed fact of nature but a legal position, and legal positions can always be reversed. When such a reversal occurs, the consequences for you are immediate and severe. You're officially reclassified as illegitimate, a bastard in the eyes of both the law and the court. Your title as princess is stripped away, and you are demoted to a considerably lesser rank, your former standing simply erased from the record. This is not a gradual decline but a formal, decisive change of status, accomplished through official declaration. One day you are a princess of the realm, and effectively the next, you are something considerably diminished, your grand identity legally dismantled in a matter of weeks. The practical effects follow swiftly upon the legal ones. Your household, once befitting a princess, is reduced accordingly, its size and grandeur cut down to match your new, lower station. The prospects that defined your future, chief among them the great dynastic marriage you were being carefully groomed for, collapse, because a bastard is a far less valuable piece on the diplomatic board than a legitimate princess ever was. The whole architecture of your expected life, built up carefully over years, comes crashing down, and you must adjust to a reality far smaller and far less certain than the one you were raised to expect. And through this wrenching demotion, you are expected to conduct yourself with grace, to accept your altered status without protest or open complaint. There is no room whatsoever for public resentment or defiance, because the will behind your demotion is the will of the crown itself, and resistance would be both futile and genuinely dangerous. You must absorb the loss of your title, your standing, and your prospects with outward composure, bowing to a decision made far above you. The expectation is not merely that you endure the change, but that you endure it obediently, whatever you might privately feel inside. Yet here is the strange, unstable heart of it all. This reclassification need not be permanent. Just as politics can strip you of your legitimacy, politics can also restore it. You might spend years in the diminished state of a bastard, only to be quietly returned to favor and rank later, when circumstances change and it suits the crown to do so. Your status can swing back and forth according to the needs and calculations of the moment, elevating and demoting you as the political situation dictates. Stability, in short, is simply not something your identity is permitted to have. Consider what this actually does to your sense of who you are. Your identity, the fundamental question of whether you are a princess or a bastard, legitimate or not, is placed entirely at the mercy of political forces well beyond your control. It can be taken away and given back, revised and reversed, as though the truth of your own birth were merely a matter of current political convenience. You cannot rely even on this most basic fact of your existence, because it can be rewritten by decree whenever it suits someone more powerful than you. It is a profound insecurity, a life in which nothing about your standing is ever truly settled. And this precariousness plays out against the backdrop of your grand and gilded home, which offers its own particular brand of splendid discomfort. Let's turn to your grand home, which is enormous, magnificent, and absolutely freezing. Tudor palaces are built of stone, drafts, and ambition, with vast, echoing chambers that no amount of tapestry can ever fully warm. Fires roar in the great hearths, but the heat vanishes upward into the towering ceilings, leaving you shivering in your finery just a few feet away from the flames. And because these palaces have no real plumbing to speak of, and thousands of people passing constantly through them, they must periodically be emptied out entirely so the whole place can be scrubbed clean of accumulated filth. Your beautiful royal residence is, in essence, a splendid, gilded, poorly heated barn that requires regular airing out. Let's start with the sheer scale of the place, because a royal palace is vast beyond anything ordinary experience prepares you for. Great halls, long galleries, soaring chambers, and endless corridors, all built of stone on an ambitious and deliberately imposing scale. It is designed to awe, to impress upon everyone who enters the majesty and power of the crown, and in that particular goal, it succeeds magnificently. But scale and stone come with a price, paid entirely in comfort, because these enormous spaces are extraordinarily difficult to keep warm, and stone, for all its grandeur, holds onto cold with real dedication. The heating, such as it is, relies on great open fires blazing in massive hearths. These fires are genuinely impressive, throwing out real heat and light, and gathering near one is a genuinely pleasant experience. But the warmth they produce is hopelessly outmatched by the sheer volume of the rooms they're meant to heat. The warm air rises and disperses into the towering ceilings and echoing spaces above, leaving much of the chamber below still cold. Stand close to the hearth, and you may be warm along one side of your body. Step a few paces away, and the chill reclaims you almost instantly. It is warmth confined to a small radius inside a very large, very cold room. The tapestries adorning your walls are not purely decorative, though they are certainly beautiful in their own right. They serve the practical purpose of insulating the cold stone, trapping a little warmth, and blocking some of the drafts that find their way through the fabric of the building. And drafts there are, in real abundance, because a structure of this size and age is riddled with gaps and openings through which cold air steadily steals in. Even swathed in rich hangings, the palace remains a genuinely drafty place, the cold seeping in around windows and doors, and through the very stones themselves. Then there is the matter of sanitation, which the palace handles rather poorly given the sheer number of people it contains at any given time. Thousands may pass through a great royal residence, and the arrangements for dealing with the waste and filth of such a crowd are primitive by any modern measure. Over time, grime and foulness accumulate steadily throughout the building, no matter how much effort goes into managing it. A palace packed with people is a palace steadily growing dirtier by the day, and the accumulated filth becomes both genuinely unpleasant and, in an age deeply fearful of bad air, a source of real anxiety. The solution to this problem is as dramatic as it is revealing. Periodically, the entire court must pack up and leave, emptying the palace completely so the whole place can be thoroughly cleaned. The building is aired out, scrubbed down, and refreshed while its royal occupants relocate elsewhere for a time. This is not a minor tidying up but a wholesale evacuation, undertaken precisely because a continuously occupied palace becomes intolerable over time. Your magnificent home requires regular abandonment simply to remain habitable, which says a great deal about what daily life inside it is actually like. So you dwell in genuine splendor, surrounded by grandeur and beauty and every trapping of supreme status, and you are, quite often, cold and at times living amid genuinely accumulating filth. The palace impresses everyone who beholds it, and comfortably warms almost no one. It is a gilded, drafty, periodically evacuated marvel, inspiring and thoroughly inconvenient in roughly equal measure. And that periodic evacuation, that packing up of the entire court, leads directly into one of the more grueling recurring features of royal life, the great, lumbering journey known as the royal progress. Speaking of emptying the palace, let's discuss where you actually go when it becomes unlivable. On progress, the court packs up and travels, moving the entire royal household from estate to estate in an enormous, lumbering caravan of wagons, horses, servants, and luggage. It sounds on paper like a lovely tour of the countryside, until you realize it actually means jolting along rutted roads for hours at a time, sleeping in unfamiliar beds night after night, and imposing your entire staff on nervous hosts who very nearly bankrupt themselves trying to feed you properly. Your possessions are constantly packed and unpacked. Your comfort is secondary to logistics at every turn. The scenery is genuinely nice. Your spine files a formal complaint anyway. Let's begin with the scale of the undertaking, because moving a royal court is no simple matter of tossing a bag into a cart. The court is an enormous body of people, hundreds upon hundreds of them, along with all the furnishings, hangings, plate, clothing, and countless possessions required to maintain royal life on the road. Relocating all of this means assembling a vast caravan of wagons and horses, a slow-moving procession of people and goods stretching visibly along the road. It is a massive logistical operation, and you are but one traveler within this ponderous, creaking migration across the countryside. The travel itself is a genuine ordeal, whatever charm the notion of a countryside journey might suggest from a comfortable distance. The roads of your era are rough, rutted, and uneven, and the miles pass slowly and uncomfortably. Hours spent traveling over such ground, whether on horseback or in some jolting conveyance, punish the body thoroughly. There is nothing smooth or swift about any of it. You endure the jolting and the tedium for long stretches at a time, the discomfort accumulating with every rough mile, arriving at each destination weary and battered by the sheer physical toll of simply getting there. Then there is the matter of where you actually stay, because a progress means a constant succession of unfamiliar lodgings. You move from estate to estate, sleeping in beds and chambers that are never quite your own, adjusting again and again to new surroundings. There is little of the comfort that comes from familiar rooms and settled routines. Just as you grow accustomed to one place, it is already time to pack up and move on to the next. Your possessions are perpetually being packed away and unpacked again, a ceaseless cycle of settling and unsettling that allows for no real, lasting sense of home along the way. Spare a thought, too, for the unfortunate hosts on whom this enormous court periodically descends. When the royal household arrives at a nobleman's estate, that host is obliged to accommodate and feed the entire vast company, an expense that can prove genuinely ruinous. To host the court is a great honor and a great burden all at once, and many a host has strained his resources right to the limit, trying to provide fittingly for so many unexpected guests. The nervous scramble to feed and house so many people, to impress the crown without financially collapsing under the cost, is a very real feature of the progress, and the sums involved could bankrupt the unlucky and the overeager alike. Throughout all of this, your own comfort remains decidedly secondary to the demands of logistics. The progress is undertaken for reasons of state and practicality, to allow palaces to be properly cleaned, to display the monarch to the wider realm, to distribute the considerable cost of maintaining the court across many different hosts. It is not arranged for your ease or your pleasure. So you are swept along in the great migration, your convenience subordinate to the larger machinery of the enterprise, enduring the discomfort simply because that is what the progress requires of everyone caught up in it, yourself included. There is, to be fair, some genuine reward in all of this, because the countryside you pass through can be genuinely beautiful, and there is real novelty in seeing new places and grand estates. The scenery offers authentic pleasures to a traveler willing to look for them. But these pleasures come wrapped tightly in physical hardship, the jolting roads and the strange beds and the endless packing all exacting their steady toll along the way. The progress is a mixture of spectacle and suffering, grand in conception and genuinely grueling in practice. And should all this traveling and discomfort leave you unwell, you fall into the hands of your physicians, whose remedies are their own particular adventure entirely. Let's talk about what happens when you fall ill, because royal medicine is a fascinating blend of real learning, confident guesswork, and enthusiastic bloodletting. Your physicians are learned men who sincerely believe your health depends on balancing four humors sloshing around somewhere inside you. So a fever might be treated by draining away some of your blood, an ailment by purging, a troublesome mood by adjusting your diet according to whether it's deemed too hot, too cold, too wet, or too dry. Being royal means you get access to the very best doctors of the age, which unfortunately still means you might well be bled, purged, and prescribed powdered gemstones for a simple headache. Let's start with the theory that governs all of this, the doctrine of the four humors. Your physicians believe the human body contains four essential fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, and that health depends entirely on keeping these four fluids in proper balance. Illness, in this view, arises whenever the humors fall out of balance, with one becoming excessive or deficient relative to the others. Treatment, therefore, aims to restore balance by reducing whatever happens to be in excess. It is a coherent, learned system, taught and studied with real seriousness, and it is also, from a modern standpoint, almost entirely wrong, which makes its confident application to your royal person a genuinely alarming affair. The most notorious tool for restoring this balance is bloodletting, the deliberate draining of blood from the patient. If your trouble is thought to stem from an excess of blood, the logical remedy is simply to remove some of it, and so you may be bled, your life's blood drawn off into a bowl in the sincere and confident belief that this will make you well again. It is applied to fevers and to a remarkably wide range of other complaints besides. That draining blood from an already sick person is more likely to weaken them than heal them is simply not understood at this point in medical history, and so the treatment is administered with real conviction. Sometimes repeatedly over the course of a single illness, purging is another favored approach. The clearing out of the body through various genuinely unpleasant means, meant to expel whatever corrupt humor is believed to be causing the trouble. Where bloodletting reduces an excess of blood specifically, purging addresses other imbalances by forcibly emptying the digestive system. It is uncomfortable, undignified, and grounded in exactly the same flawed theory as bloodletting. But it follows the internal logic perfectly. If illness comes from something bad lurking within the body, then removing that something by whatever route available ought to help. So you may be purged just as readily as you are bled, all in the name of restoring your humoral equilibrium. Diet, too, is enlisted in this ongoing balancing act, with foods classified according to supposed qualities of hot, cold, wet, and dry. If your condition is judged to arise from too much of one quality, your diet may be carefully adjusted to counteract it, favoring foods thought to carry the opposite nature. Even your moods are understood in humoral terms and treated accordingly. A melancholy disposition, for instance, being linked directly to an excess of black bile, and addressed through corresponding dietary remedies. Your physicians thus manage not only your bodily ailments but your temperament as well, through this same elaborate and fundamentally mistaken framework. The remedies prescribed can be genuinely exotic and expensive, befitting your elevated status. Powdered gemstones, rare imported substances, and costly preparations may all be administered on the theory that precious and potent materials must surely possess some corresponding healing virtue. Being royal, you receive treatments well beyond the reach of ordinary people, which is not, in this particular case, quite the advantage it sounds like. The finest and most expensive medicine your age has to offer remains built on exactly the same fundamental misunderstandings as the cheapest. And here is the true irony of your medical care. You are attended by the most learned and celebrated physicians available anywhere, the very best the age can offer. And their best remains bloodletting, purging, and powdered stones. Your rank guarantees you the finest medicine, and the finest medicine happens to be founded on error. So when you fall ill, you are placed in the hands of confident, educated men who will bleed you, purge you, and dose you with expensive nonsense, all with the utmost professional seriousness. Being royal does not spare you any of this. It merely guarantees you the most distinguished version available. And speaking of the privileges of rank, even the clothes on your back are governed by the actual force of law. Now that we've covered how uncomfortable your clothing is, let's cover how it is also, quite literally, legislated. Tudor England maintains strict rules about who may wear what, laws that reserve certain fabrics, furs, and colors exclusively for the highest ranks of society. As royalty, you sit at the very top of this pyramid, draped in silks, cloth of gold, and rich purples that ordinary people are legally forbidden from ever wearing. Your wardrobe is not merely fashion. It is a walking legal declaration of your status. Every thread you wear announces exactly how important you are supposed to be. And woe to the merchant's wife who dares dress above her station. Let's begin with the somewhat surprising fact that clothing is a matter of actual, enforceable law in your world. There exist formal regulations governing precisely who may wear which fabrics, furs, and colors, tied strictly to rank and social status. These are not mere customs or vague social expectations, but formal rules carrying real legal force behind them. The underlying idea is that dress should reflect and actively reinforce the social hierarchy, that a person's outward appearance should announce their proper place in society at a single glance. And so the finest and most costly materials are legally restricted, reserved specifically for those of sufficiently exalted rank to be permitted them at all. At the very top of this legally enforced hierarchy sits royalty, which is to say, you. The most magnificent materials, the ones forbidden entirely to lesser folk, are yours by right of your position alone. You are draped in silks of exquisite quality, in cloth of gold that gleams with actual precious metal woven directly into the fabric, in rich purples carrying particular historic prestige, reserved exclusively for the very highest ranks of society. These are the visible marks of supreme status, luxuries so exalted that the law itself stands guard over them for people like you. Consider what this means for how your clothing actually functions, because it is far more than simple adornment. Every garment you wear operates as a legal statement of your rank, an announcement backed by the full authority of law of exactly how important you are. The fabrics, the furs, the colors, all of it communicates your place at the summit of society to anyone who happens to behold you. You cannot simply dress however you please. Your clothing exists at the exact intersection of status and law. To be clothed as royalty is to wear your position visibly upon your own body, a walking proclamation of precisely where you stand in the overall order of things. The flip side of your privilege is the strict prohibition placed on everyone beneath you. Ordinary people are forbidden by law from wearing the materials reserved for their betters, and dressing above one's station is a genuine legal transgression, not merely an embarrassing faux pas. The merchant's wife who drapes herself in fabrics meant for the nobility risks real consequences, because she is presuming to a rank the law explicitly says is not hers to claim. The system polices these boundaries deliberately, ensuring the visible markers of status remain confined to those legally entitled to them, and that no one may falsely elevate themselves through mere clothing alone. The purpose behind all of this is the preservation of the social order itself. In a world deeply invested in hierarchy and rank, the ability to read a person's station at a single glance genuinely matters, and clothing provides exactly that legibility, so long as it remains strictly regulated. By reserving certain splendors for the highest ranks alone, the law ensures that outward appearance reliably reflects actual position. Your magnificent dress is thus part of a much larger project of keeping everyone visibly, legally in their assigned place. The finery at the top matched carefully by prohibitions running all the way down. So you wear your silks, your cloth of gold, your royal purple, not merely because they are beautiful, though they certainly are, but because they are yours by law and forbidden to nearly everyone else around you. Your wardrobe is a privilege of rank enforced by actual statute. Every garment a declaration of supremacy that lesser people may admire from a distance but never legally imitate. It is fashion as legislation, splendor as status made visible and lawful. Yet for all this legally guaranteed magnificence draped upon you, the wealth it represents is, in a curious way, not truly yours at all. Let's talk about your money, or rather, the amusing fact that you have essentially none of your own. Yes, you live surrounded by unimaginable wealth, but almost none of it actually belongs to you to command as you wish. Your entire household is funded by the crown. Your allowance can be granted or withdrawn entirely at will, and your jewels and gowns belong more to your rank than to you personally as an individual. You cannot simply decide to spend freely, to travel on a whim, or to support yourself independently. You are lavishly maintained, and at the very same time, completely dependent. A person of enormous perceived value who does not actually possess control over so much as a single coin. Let's begin with a striking contradiction sitting at the very heart of your material existence. You are surrounded by wealth of a kind most people could never even imagine: magnificent palaces, gorgeous clothing, precious jewels, abundant food, an entire household devoted entirely to your comfort. By any outward measure, you live in extraordinary luxury, and yet almost none of this abundance is genuinely yours to command. You dwell amid riches without truly possessing them, enjoying every benefit of great wealth while lacking any real control over it whatsoever. You are, in a very real sense, rich and penniless at exactly the same time. Consider first how your entire way of life is actually funded, because the answer reveals just how deep your dependence runs. Your household, with all its staff and expenses, is maintained by the crown. The money that supports you flows from a source entirely outside yourself, granted specifically to sustain you in the style your rank requires. You do not earn it, control it, or hold it independently in any meaningful sense. It is provided to you, and what is provided can also be adjusted, reduced, or withheld entirely, according to the will of those who provide it in the first place. Your comfortable existence rests entirely on this external support, which you have no way to secure independently for yourself. Your allowance, the funds notionally at your own disposal, is likewise granted rather than owned outright, and it can be given or taken away entirely at will. In times of favor, it may be generous. In times of disfavor, it may shrink drastically or vanish altogether. You have no independent claim to it, no guaranteed way to secure its continuance. It is a privilege extended to you, not a possession you hold securely in your own right. This means that even the money meant for your own personal use hangs on the goodwill and calculations of others, subject to withdrawal whenever it suits whoever happens to control the purse strings. Even your jewels and gowns, the splendid things you wear every single day, belong more to your rank than to you as an individual person. They adorn you because you are a princess, markers of the status you currently occupy rather than personal property you freely own and control outright. Should your position ever change, these trappings may be reassigned or withdrawn entirely along with it. You are, in effect, the temporary bearer of a magnificence that attaches to your role, not the true, permanent owner of it. The glittering wealth on your person is essentially the wardrobe of your station, held for exactly as long as you continue to hold the station itself. The practical result of all this is a fairly profound lack of personal autonomy. You cannot simply decide to spend as you wish, to travel wherever you please, or to support yourself through your own independent means. You lack the independent resources that would ever make such freedom genuinely possible. Every significant thing you might want to do depends entirely on the permission and provision of others around you. For all your perceived value and all your visible splendor, you cannot direct your own material life, because you do not actually command the wealth that surrounds you on every side. You are maintained, not empowered. So you exist in this peculiar state of gilded dependence, a person of enormous worth and essentially no real financial control, lavished with luxury, and yet unable to command a single coin on your own independent authority. Your value to others is immense, yet you cannot convert that value into any freedom genuinely your own. It is wealth without ownership, splendor without independence, a life of abundance in which you remain ultimately powerless over the very riches that define you in the eyes of everyone else. And in the absence of any real control over your fortune, the one thing that remains truly yours to safeguard is your reputation, which you must protect at every single waking moment of your life. Since your every material need is managed entirely by others, let's examine the one thing that truly is yours to protect: your reputation. As a princess, your virtue and conduct are matters of genuine national importance, because your marriageability, and therefore your entire political worth, depends completely on your unblemished good name. This means you are watched constantly for any hint of impropriety. A rumor, a misread friendship, a single unguarded moment, and gossip spreads through the court like fire racing through dry thatch. You must guard your behavior every waking second, performing perfect modesty and grace, knowing all the while that a single whisper could damage your value and your entire future beyond repair. Let's begin by understanding why your reputation carries such enormous weight in the first place. Your entire political value rests upon your suitability as a bride for a great dynastic marriage, and that suitability depends heavily on your virtue and the spotlessness of your good name. A princess whose reputation is unblemished is a valuable, desirable match. A princess touched by scandal is diminished, her worth as a diplomatic asset noticeably compromised. Your good name is therefore not a private concern at all, but a matter of real political and dynastic importance, tied directly to the very purpose your whole life has been shaped to serve. This raises the stakes of your everyday conduct to an extraordinary degree, because anything that threatens your reputation threatens your value and your future in the same breath. Your virtue must be beyond question, your behavior beyond reproach, your good name protected as the precious asset it genuinely is. There is no room here for the ordinary lapses and follies that others might indulge in and quietly recover from. For you, a single stain on your reputation could damage the very thing that makes you useful to your family and your realm, and so its protection becomes a matter of constant, serious vigilance. Consequently, you are watched always and closely for any hint of impropriety. Your conduct sits under perpetual observation, scrutinized by the many people who surround you and by the wider court beyond them. Nothing you do escapes notice, and everything you do is subject to interpretation. You live under a kind of continuous surveillance, your behavior forever on display and forever being assessed. There is no genuine off-stage moment, no time when you are truly unobserved and free to relax your guard, because the watching never stops and the assessment never really ceases. The danger lies in how easily reputation can be damaged, often by things falling far short of any actual wrongdoing. A mere rumor, whether founded in truth or not, can do real and lasting harm. A friendship innocently meant but capable of being misread can invite dangerous speculation. An unguarded moment, a gesture or word open to unflattering interpretation, can be seized upon and spread rapidly. In a court that thrives on gossip, such things travel with astonishing speed, running through the place like fire through dry thatch. You need not do anything genuinely improper at all to find your good name imperiled. The mere appearance or suggestion of it can be entirely enough. This forces upon you a relentless, unending self-discipline, a guarding of your behavior in every single waking moment. You must perform perfect modesty and grace continuously, never letting slip anything that could be misconstrued, never allowing yourself the careless ease that others might simply take for granted. Every interaction, every gesture, every single word must be measured carefully against how it might be perceived, and what use might later be made of it. You're always managing the impression you create, always conscious of the watching eyes, always maintaining the flawless propriety your position demands of you. It is an exhausting, unending performance, and the cruelty of it lies in how much rests on how little, because a single persistent whisper could damage your value and your future beyond any real repair. All your care might be undone by one persistent rumor, one misinterpreted moment, one piece of gossip that takes hold and simply will not let go. The consequences of a damaged reputation could follow you permanently, harming your prospects and your standing in ways that cannot easily be mended. So you guard yourself ceaselessly, aware that the stakes are your entire future and that the margin for error is vanishingly small. And it is this carefully protected reputation, this spotless good name, that finally delivers you to the very purpose it was all meant to serve in the first place, your marriage at long last. After years of negotiation, waiting, and portrait swapping, the marriage is finally arranged, and now you must actually go and be married. You may be sent far from everything you have ever known, to a foreign court where they speak a language you have studied diligently but never actually lived inside, to marry a man you are meeting essentially for the first time in your life. The wedding itself becomes a grand political spectacle, celebrated enthusiastically by everyone except, quite possibly, the two people actually getting married. And once the ceremony ends, your new and most urgent duty becomes brutally clear, because a royal wife exists, above all else, to produce a son. Let's begin with the moment of arrival, the culmination of all that waiting and negotiation stretching back years. After the long process of exchanged portraits, haggled dowries, and uncertain suspense, the match is finally settled, and the wedding must actually take place. This is the event toward which your entire life has been quietly directed, the fulfillment of your purpose as a dynastic asset. And yet, for all its momentousness, it arrives as something happening to you rather than something you have genuinely chosen, the long-planned outcome of decisions made by others, finally coming to pass with you standing at its center. The wedding often requires you to leave behind everything familiar. You may be sent far away to a foreign court in a distant land, to take up your new life among total strangers. Everything you have known, your home, your household, the faces and places of your entire upbringing, may be left behind as you travel toward your husband's realm. It is a wrenching displacement, a departure into the unknown, and it is simply expected of you, one more duty of your station. You go where the marriage requires, however far that may be from everything you have ever known. The foreignness of your new home can be genuinely profound, even down to the language itself. You may arrive in a court where the tongue spoken is one you have studied diligently, but never actually lived inside, learned carefully from books and tutors rather than absorbed through daily life. To move from academic knowledge of a language into dwelling within it, surrounded by native speakers using it for every ordinary purpose, is a considerable adjustment. Here, at least, your rigorous education finally proves its worth, though the gap between schoolroom language and the living language of a real court is one you must bridge quickly and under real pressure. Then there is the groom himself, the man you are marrying, whom you are meeting essentially for the first time in person. All you have known of him so far has come through flattering portraits and the careful reports of negotiators. Now you encounter the actual reality. This is the person to whom you will be bound for the rest of your life, and you come to him as near strangers, your acquaintance beginning in earnest only as your marriage itself does. Whatever he proves to be, agreeable or otherwise, you must build your life with him, the match having been made entirely for reasons of state rather than any bond of feeling between you. The wedding itself unfolds as a magnificent spectacle, a grand occasion of political and dynastic celebration. It marks the sealing of alliances, the joining of houses, the achievement of the diplomatic aims your marriage was always designed to serve, and it is observed with all the pageantry such an event demands. The realm celebrates. The courts rejoice. The significance of the union is proclaimed loudly and repeatedly. Everyone, it seems, has genuine cause for celebration, with the possible exception of the two people actually being married, for whom the day may hold rather more uncertainty than joy, beneath all the ceremony and splendor. And when the celebration finally subsides, your new and most pressing duty stands starkly revealed. A royal wife exists, above all else, to produce a male heir, to secure the succession and continue the line. This expectation settles upon you at once. The purpose of your marriage, beyond its diplomatic function, is fundamentally dynastic, and that purpose now becomes your central, all-consuming task. The pageantry gives way quickly to expectation, and you understand clearly that your worth in this new role will be measured, above almost everything else, by your ability to bear a son. And that expectation carries with it a peril as grave as any you have faced in your entire life so far, because childbirth in your age is genuinely, seriously dangerous. Now that you are wed, let's confront the terrifying job at the heart of your new role: childbirth. Producing a healthy male heir is the entire point of your marriage, and the pressure surrounding it is immense and utterly unrelenting. But childbirth in the Tudor age is genuinely dangerous, with no reliable medicine to speak of, no understanding whatsoever of infection, and enormous risk hanging over both mother and child alike. Even queens and princesses die in childbed. Even royal bobbies, so desperately longed for, are lost. Each pregnancy is, quite literally, a gamble with your own life. And if you produce only daughters or no living children at all, the disappointment and the danger to your position both grow heavier with every passing year. Let's begin with the central expectation that now defines your entire existence: the production of a healthy male heir. This is understood without question to be the very purpose of your marriage, the reason the union was made in the first place, and the standard against which your success as a wife will be measured for the rest of your life. The pressure is immense, and it does not relent because the stakes here are dynastic: the continuation of a line, the security of an entire succession. Everyone around you looks to you to fulfill this duty, and their expectations bear down on you constantly, every single day. Your worth in this new role becomes bound up entirely with your ability to bear a son. But this duty, so heavily demanded of you, is also one of the most genuinely dangerous things a woman of your age can undertake. Childbirth in the Tudor world is perilous in ways modern medicine has long since made almost unimaginable, unshielded by any of the medical knowledge that later centuries would eventually develop. There is no reliable medicine to ease or safeguard the process, no understanding of infection or how it spreads through a birthing chamber. None of the interventions that could avert disaster once something goes wrong. The risks to both mother and child are enormous and ever-present, and they cannot be reasoned away or wished aside. To bear a child in your world is to place yourself in real mortal danger, again and again, with each new pregnancy. The danger does not spare the highly born, either. Even queens and princesses, with the very finest care their world has to offer, die in childbed. And even royal infants, so longed for and so precious to everyone around them, are lost in devastating numbers. Rank provides no reliable protection whatsoever against these hazards, because the underlying medicine is simply inadequate for everyone, however exalted their station might be. So you cannot comfort yourself with the thought that your status somehow shields you from the worst outcomes. The perils of childbirth reach into palaces exactly as readily as they reach into humbler homes, claiming mothers and bobbies alike without any regard for their importance. Each pregnancy, therefore, is a genuine gamble with your life, an undertaking whose outcome can never be assured in advance. You face the real possibility of your own death, and the death of your child, every single time, the risk renewed with each new occasion. And this is not a danger encountered only once, but potentially many times over, since the pressure to produce a surviving male heir may require pregnancy after pregnancy in succession. Each one carries its own peril, its own uncertain outcome, so that the very duty sitting at the heart of your role repeatedly places your survival itself in question. It is a heavy, frightening burden to carry through your entire married life. Consider, too, the compounding weight of failure to produce exactly what is demanded of you. Should you bear only daughters, or should your children fail to survive infancy, or should you have no living children at all, the situation grows steadily worse with every passing year. The disappointment deepens, and with it, the danger to your position, because a royal wife who does not deliver the desired heir becomes genuinely vulnerable. Her failure to fulfill her central purpose can imperil her standing, her security, even the marriage itself. The pressure thus intensifies over time, the stakes rising higher with every year that passes without the longed-for son finally arriving. So you face this terrifying duty sitting at the very core of your married life, charged with producing an heir through a process that genuinely threatens your survival, under relentless pressure, with the danger to your position mounting steadily should you fail to deliver what is required of you. It is a role that combines the highest possible expectation with the gravest possible personal risk, a gamble repeated as often as the demand for a son requires it. Your body becomes, in a very real sense, the instrument on which an entire dynasty's hopes rest, and the cost of those hopes is borne by you, and you alone. And beyond even this mortal peril lies another shadow entirely, the ever-present possibility of a fall from grace so complete that it ends behind fortress walls. Let's address the grim possibility that hangs quietly over every powerful woman in this court, because in Tudor England, being royal offers no real protection from ruin, and sometimes actively invites it. Fall far enough from favor, become entangled in the wrong faction, or simply stand too close to the throne at the wrong moment, and you may find yourself imprisoned. The Tower of London is not merely a fortress in your world. It is a threat, a waiting room, and for some unlucky few, a final destination. Princesses have been confined there, watched, questioned, and left to wonder whether the next set of footsteps in the corridor outside is bringing supper, or something far worse. Let's begin with the sobering truth that your exalted status offers no shield whatsoever against destruction. One might imagine that being royal, being a princess, would place you safely above the dangers threatening ordinary people. But the reverse can just as easily be true. Your very proximity to power and to the throne can make you a target, an object of suspicion, a piece in genuinely dangerous games played by others. Being highly born does not protect you from ruin. It can actively invite it, drawing you into perils that lesser figures never have to face at all. The very heights you occupy are precisely what expose you to the most catastrophic possible falls. Consider the various ways such a fall might actually come about. You might fall far enough from the monarch's favor to find yourself in real, tangible danger, your diminished standing leaving you exposed to enemies who once kept a respectful distance. You might become entangled, whether through your own actions or the actions of others, in the wrong faction, caught up in schemes and rivalries that turn genuinely deadly. Or you might simply stand too close to the throne at the wrong political moment, your nearness to the succession making you a threat, or a useful tool, in the eyes of those who fear you or would use you against someone else. Any of these paths can lead to disaster, sometimes with very little that you could have done to prevent it. When such ruin finally comes, it can take the specific form of imprisonment, and the place of that imprisonment looms enormously large in the imagination of your entire world. The Tower of London is far more than a mere fortress standing on the riverbank. It is a symbol laden with genuine dread. It serves as a standing threat held over the heads of the powerful, a warning of exactly what may await those who fall from grace. It functions as a waiting room where the accused and the merely suspected are held while their fates are slowly determined elsewhere. And for some, it becomes a final destination altogether, the last place they will ever know. Its very name carries the weight of all these meanings at once. Princesses themselves have been confined within its walls, held under guard, subjected to constant watching and repeated questioning. To be imprisoned, there is to be stripped of freedom and dignity in a single stroke, placed entirely at the mercy of those who now hold power over you, uncertain of what will come next. You would be observed constantly, interrogated perhaps, your every word and gesture scrutinized closely for evidence of guilt or innocence. The confinement itself is not merely physical but deeply psychological, a state of helpless suspense in which your fate rests entirely in other hands, and in which you can do very little but wait and wonder. That waiting, that terrible sustained uncertainty, may be the cruelest aspect of the whole ordeal. Confined within the tower, you would be left to wonder what each new sound in the corridor outside might actually mean, whether the approaching footsteps bring something as ordinary as a meal or something far more dreadful entirely. You would not know from one moment to the next whether release, continued imprisonment, or execution awaited you at the end of it. To live in such prolonged suspense, unable to determine your own fate and uncertain of it at every single turn, is a very particular kind of torment. The dread stretched out over hours and days with no assurance of how it will finally end. So this shadow hangs quietly over your entire life. The knowledge that for all your rank, or perhaps precisely because of it, you might fall far enough to find yourself behind the tower's walls, imprisoned, watched, and waiting on an uncertain, possibly fatal fate. Being royal has not spared you this particular danger. It has, in its own way, brought you closer within its reach. The threat is real, the precedent well established, the possibility never entirely absent from the quiet calculations of your existence. And whether that shadow ever actually falls upon you or passes you by entirely, your story, however it ultimately unfolds, was rarely yours alone to write. And so we come to the close of your royal life, however it may eventually end, because a princess's story rarely wraps up neatly. Perhaps you grow old, having outlived husbands, rivals, and disappointments, your dynastic value long since spent by the time old age finally arrives. Perhaps you rise, against every conceivable odd, to wear a crown entirely your own. Or perhaps you simply endure, year after year, as a piece on someone else's board, moved and demoted and quietly restored as politics repeatedly demand. Whatever your fate turns out to be, it was seldom yours alone to choose. From your first breath as the wrong-gendered heir to your very last, you belonged not to yourself, but to the dynasty that made you. Let's begin by acknowledging that your story, like the lives of so many women in your position, resists any truly tidy conclusion. The neat resolutions we expect from fiction are rarely granted to a princess whose fate remains bound up with forces too large and too changeable for that kind of comfort. Your ending, whatever it eventually proves to be, is likely to be complicated, shaped by circumstances well beyond your control, unfolding according to a logic that has very little to do with your own private wishes. There is no guarantee of a satisfying close here, only the continuation and eventual conclusion of a life lived largely at the direction of others. One possible ending sees you growing old, outliving the husbands, rivals, and disappointments that filled your earlier years. You might survive into genuine old age, having watched the entire drama of your life play out around you, the great matches and rivalries and sudden reversals, all gradually receding into the past. But survival into old age brings its own quiet fate, because by then, your value, so central to your earlier life, may be long since spent. Having outlasted your usefulness as a bride and a bearer of heirs, you may find yourself gently diminished in importance, a survivor whose moment in the sun has simply passed. Another possibility, rarer and considerably more dramatic, sees you rise against all odds to wear a crown entirely your own. Fortune, and the deaths of others standing ahead of you, might elevate you unexpectedly, transforming you from a pawn into an actual monarch, from a piece moved on the board into a player commanding it directly. It would be a startling reversal, an ascent few could have predicted from the disappointing circumstances of your birth all those years earlier. Such things have genuinely happened, the wrong-gendered infant of one era becoming the sovereign of another entirely. It is the most triumphant of the paths your life might take, though even it arrives wrapped in burdens and dangers all its own. Or perhaps your fate is simply to endure, year after year, as a piece in games played by others. You might live out your entire life being moved about the board, elevated and demoted and restored as the shifting demands of politics dictate, never quite mistress of your own destiny at any point along the way. This is, in many ways, the most representative of the possible endings, a life of persistence within real constraints, of weathering reversals imposed from above without ever fully escaping them. You would go on adapting to each new turn, your circumstances rising and falling while your fundamental lack of control remained constant throughout. What unites all of these possible endings is the same thread that has run through your entire existence from the very beginning, that your fate was seldom yours alone to choose. Whether you aged quietly into spent irrelevance, rose improbably to sovereignty, or simply endured as a perpetual instrument of other people's designs, the shape of your life was determined largely by forces well outside yourself. Your choices, such as they genuinely were, played out within narrow bounds set by dynasty, by politics, and by the will of the powerful people around you. The direction of your life belonged, in the end, more to your circumstances than it ever truly belonged to you. And this is the truth that has defined you from the very beginning, that you belonged not to yourself, but to the dynasty that made you, from your first breath as the disappointing daughter who should have been a son, to whatever end finally awaited you. You existed as an asset, an instrument, a single piece in the great design of your house. Your value, your marriage, your very identity were all shaped by that fundamental belonging. It is a heavy truth to rest upon a single life, so thoroughly given over to purposes beyond the self. So there it is, a single life spent as a princess in Tudor England. From the muted applause greeting your disappointing birth, to the uncertain shadows of your final years, you were poured into clothing that held you rigid, painted with cosmetics that quietly poisoned you, and crowned with headdresses heavy enough to ache in your very bones. You ate like royalty and rotted your teeth for the privilege of it. You were educated brilliantly and watched relentlessly, surrounded always by companions who were never quite true friends, in palaces that were magnificent and freezing all at once. And beneath all the silk and gold ran a truth colder than any drafty great hall. You were never truly your own. Your marriage was a treaty. Your legitimacy was a matter of politics. Your reputation was a national asset. Your body was the instrument on which an entire dynasty pinned its hopes. You could be a princess on Tuesday and a bastard by Friday, elevated and demoted at the stroke of someone else's pen, all while being expected to smile gracefully through every single reversal life handed you. Yet here is the thing worth remembering as you drift off tonight. Real women lived these exact lives. They endured the pins and the poison and the endless watching. They waited patiently for strangers, survived the genuine perils of childbed navigated courts that could turn deadly over nothing more than a whispered rumor, and some of them, against every conceivable odd stacked against them, rose to shape the whole of history itself. They were pieces on a board, yes, but they were also stubborn, clever, resilient people who found their own ways to endure a world that offered them so very little control over their own existence. So tonight, as you settle into a bed that is entirely, genuinely your own, in a room where no one at all is watching, free to choose your own clothes, your own company, and your own future, maybe spare a quiet thought for those long-ago princesses. They wore the crown, the finery, and the cage, all at once, and they carried it with a grace we can now scarcely imagine. History may be gilded and glamorous on the surface, but underneath it all, it is proof of just how much people can genuinely bear and still keep going. Rest well. You have earned your comfort and the great game, for tonight at least.